What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to implement the redesign of my website and share my process along the way. So my original website was built in 2013 and obviously a lot has changed since then. I finally made time to update my website and just wanted to document the process. So this is probably going to be a really long video as it's going to be a lot of rambling on my end about different things from design to the actual technologies I'm using and my different opinions on things about my website. So let's start off by cringing at my old website, and then I'll show you my thought process on the new one. So yeah, here is my current website, which like I said, I built in 2013. It's a WordPress site with a custom theme I built from scratch using it's using Bootstrap 2.0, which is a very early version of Bootstrap. I also believe it's using the CSS less preprocessor. So yeah, taking a look at this 5-6 years later, it's actually not bad in terms of the design. The typography is okay here with some nice bold text mixed with a nice script font. The primary color is this blue, which I took from the logo. And these cards look pretty good too, with some nice hierarchy in the typography. There's a nice transition here. So yeah, overall not bad for something I built 6 years ago. So yeah, one thing that stands out is obviously the animation here, which was the trend in pretty much most WordPress themes that I saw. So I decided to go that route, and you can see that animation here. So that's kind of fallen out of trend, and it's kind of frowned upon because accessibility is not, these sliders are not the greatest for accessibility. So I'm not going to have that for my new website. And I also want my new website to be very minimal, as most of my content, if not all of it, is now in the form of video on YouTube. So I just want a one-pager that just has some information about myself and some links. And I'll take some of the copy from these other pages too. And I'm not going to have a blog because, like I said, everything is on YouTube. Okay, so let's take a look at the design of the new website in Sketch. Okay, so here it is. Like I said, very minimal. Here's my logo. This button is supposed to be for a dark mode, which I won't have here. I actually did the design for it, but that's going to be some extra work on my end. So that's going to be the dark version. That's what that button does. And the navigation is pretty straightforward. I wanted to have one for the different sections of the website, and it just scrolls to it. But I decided there isn't too much scrolling. So these two links are just external links to my course website, which hopefully I eventually get done, and my YouTube channel. Some copy here, some nice illustrations, which I'll show you where I got that from. There's a nice one here too. Some projects I worked on, a section about me, which just links to a video which I plan to do, where I just talk about my history and how I got into programming, and a contact me section. And I'm not even going to have a contact form. I'm just going to link my email in there, and a newsletter sign up, and my footer. So yeah, very minimal, like I said, but I just wanted to have an updated website. So yeah, for the illustrations, if you haven't heard of undraw.co, definitely check it out, as they have a ton of beautiful illustrations which look great on websites, especially landing pages. So I just went here. I think I searched for developer, at least for that main one. Well, it's not here. Well, I can't find it. Maybe it was programmer. I don't know what it was, but I found it on this website. And I also found these two on there too. And I just sort of modified it to add the logos. And I modified this guy to have the blue colors. What else? So these little subtle dots I stole directly from the Refactoring UI book by Steve Sugar and Adam Wathan. You can see here it looks really good, and I tried my hardest to change it up, but whatever I did, it didn't look very good. So I just decided to steal it straight up. I'm sorry, but yeah, I'm sure they don't mind. It just looks really good. It reminds me of perforated leather, which you see in like cars, and it just adds a nice touch to the website because it was pretty plain with nothing else, just white, which is fine too, but I don't know, it just looks really good, and I just decided to steal it straight up. What else did I steal? Down here, right under the newsletter sign up, you can see some dots here, which I also stole because I'm a terrible designer, or I'm a good designer because I steal, whichever way you want to look at it. But I took that from the Gridsome, or at least inspiration from the Gridsome website, which also has dots. So as you can see here, they have a ton of dots after each section. Dots here, and they have it down here with a newsletter as well, I think. Yeah. And I just decided to steal that as well. So yeah, that's where that came from. That's where my inspiration came from. And if you want to see the finished product, which we'll build from scratch, here it is. And yeah, very simple. There's the dots. It's also responsive. There's not too much to do with the responsive because it's already a very simple layout. So yeah, we're going to build this from scratch using Gridsome and Tailwind 1.0. Okay, let's start by installing a new Gridsome project. So we can just do Gridsome create. Let's do that. Gridsome create. Let's call it Andre Madarang. If you want to take a deeper look at Gridsome, take a look at the video I did where I look at some other features of Gridsome, including its GraphQL central store. Okay, let's go into it. And I'm going to open it up in my code editor. Okay, so since we're using Tailwind, I'm going to remove all the default styling here. So we have a pages folder where our pages live, and there's some styling here. Don't worry about this ESLint error. I'm just going to remove this. And then also, I'm not going to use this about page. There's no styling in there anyways. Let's go to our layouts. We're going to use this default layout. And I'm going to remove all of this style. Okay, so save that. Save that. It's not even running yet, so that's okay. The next thing I want to do is install Tailwind. So if you look in the documentation for Gridsome, there actually is a plugin for installing Tailwind. But if you go into the repo, there's actually a note from the author. It says, read this first. And he advises against using the plugin because it's actually very simple to set up Tailwind. And he also adds purge CSS here, which we'll add as well. So first thing we have to do is actually install Tailwind. And like I said, I want to use the version 1.0, which is still in beta at the time of this recording, but should be released really soon. So if you go into the notes here for the beta, you just have to specify next when you install it. So we can do this. npm install Tailwind, the next version. Okay, that's done. Let's take a look at what else we have to do. So if you go into the docs for Tailwind, this one is for the beta. Let's just go into installation here. And we have to add a CSS file. And this changed slightly. I believe this was preflight before instead of base. So let's go ahead and add this in our project. So I'm going to put it in the source folder right here. I'm just going to add a main.css. Let's paste that in. And in our default layout, I am going to import that in here. You can also import it using JavaScript if you want, but I'm just going to do it in here. I'm going to do source equals, and it's up one, and it's called main.css. And we can remove this and just self-close it. Okay. And now we just want to generate the Tailwind config. So how do we do that? So if you go into the configuration section, you can see you can use this npx tailwind init to generate the tailwind config file. And this is going to create a tailwind.config.js, which is slightly different from the previous version, which was just tailwind.js. So let's do that. Okay. And as you can see, it's in here. There's nothing in there yet. And we will extend this in a second. And now let's go back to that blog post, which showed how to install Tailwind. And right here in the Gridsome config.js, we'll just do this. Back to our code, Gridsome config. Let's put it right here at the top. And let's grab this right here. And let's bring that in as well. And I believe you don't need the argument if it's named the default config. So tailwind.config.js. So we can just remove that. And while we're here, let's just change the site name. I'm just going to name it my name. Let's say personal portfolio. Okay, and I think that's it. We just have to start the server. So Gridsome develop. Actually, before I do that, let me just add some Tailwind classes in here to see if it's working. So another change with Tailwind 1.0 is the color scale. So now we have numeric color scales instead of the descriptive color scales like darker. So it's 100 to 900. So say text. There's still a text white because that's just a default color. But if we want BG blue, that would work in the old version, but now we have a numeric scale, and 500 is the base. Well, it's not the base, it's just in the middle, which is equivalent to just text BG blue in the last version. Okay, so Gridsome develop. Let's hope this works. Okay, let's check this out in the browser. Sorry, I forgot one thing in the config. So if we go back to the blog post, we have to add this section over here. So let's add that. So we can just add that right underneath here. CSS, okay. And this is specifying this post CSS plugins. And I have to restart this server. And now it's working. Cool. Okay, let me quickly build this site to show you that it's not using purge CSS and show you the file size, and then I'll quickly add purge CSS because I'm actually going to push this to production and I should make use of it. So if you just do Gridsome build, this will build a site with all the assets, and I'll show you the CSS file size. Okay, that's done. Let's take a look. There's a new dist folder which we can go into, and let me just go into it actually. So the assets, the CSS should be in here. CSS. So there it is, 355.4 kilobytes. And now I'm going to add purge CSS and show you the savings. So back to our blog post. We just have to install this. So let's add this. npm install that. Let's go back up one. So npm install full human post CSS purge CSS. And while that's going, I'm going to add this line to our config. So right underneath the Tailwind. And what else did he add here? So now we just need a purge CSS config.js, and we can just copy all this inside of it. So purge CSS config.js, so we'll copy all of this. And it's just specifying what you want to scan through for purge CSS to remove the unused classes. So this is a good default, and I'll just make use of that. So what's the file name again? It's purge.css.config.js. So just in the root, purge.css.config.js, and just paste that in. Okay, is that all? I think that should be it. Okay, I'm going to save that. I'm going to save this config. Actually, I think there's one more thing. Yeah, we have to add this line over here in our Gridsome config. Let's go in here. Where was it? It was right above the module exports. So right here. And that should do the trick. So now if I build it again, Gridsome build. And if you take a look at the file size again, that should be greatly reduced. Let me open it. So dist assets CSS. There we go, 2.2 kilobytes. Okay, so after all that, we can finally start the website implementation. See, I told you it was going to be a long video. So what I want to do first is just think about the different sections of the site. I can't just dump everything into an index view file because it is just a single page, but I am in the future going to have dedicated pages. So the only sections I want to separate out is this header nav section, and then this will be the content of the specific page, everything in here, and then just the footer. So very basic. So let's do that. So let's start in the default view. I'm going to close this. We don't need this anymore. We don't need this. And okay, so default up here. I'm going to use the div. I'm going to use the header. Everything else I will remove. Okay, so I'm going to use a sans serif font, which we'll define in the config in a sec. Text gray 800 will be the default color. Letting normal. And that should be fine for the defaults. And for the header, we'll do that in a second. Let me just put some lorem text in here. And just see if it renders or if anything renders. So close this. We'll leave that open. Okay. I don't think my server is running. It's not. So Gridsome develop. Okay, so that's what we added here. Let me just remove everything in the index page. You know what? We'll just leave it. Okay, so for the font, I am using Roboto, I believe. I don't really think too much about the font. Roboto was just kind of the font that was on when I opened my design program, and it looked fine, so I just went with Roboto. Okay, so I have Google Fonts opened up here, and I selected Roboto, and the weights are just normal and bold. So I'm going to copy this. And if you go into the Gridsome docs, I already have it opened here. If you go into add custom fonts, here is how we add a custom font, and they actually have Roboto in here already. So just go to main.js and paste this in. So let's go into main.js. Let me just paste in that. And we just need this. And we'll put it underneath here. And let me just specify the weights here. 400 and 700. Okay, cool. And I don't think I need this. Okay. Now we should have Roboto. I already have it on my computer, but we need to import it for it to work on the web. And now that should be importing from Google Fonts. Why is it not Roboto? Oh, okay, I didn't specify the font stack yet. So this is where we go into our config and specify the font stack. So if you go into our Tailwind config, there's nothing in here, but it's actually extending from the default config, which is now separate. So if you want to open that up, just search for Tailwind default. Sorry, I think it's default stub or something. So for some reason, my VS Code is not finding it. I think I have to open it once. So if you go into your node modules, find Tailwind somewhere here. Dist, not dist, stubs. This one. So default config.stub.js. So this is the default config file, which it extends from. And now I think I can search for it, hopefully. Okay, now it works. So the idea here, in the previous version of Tailwind, this was what you got by default. There's a few changes here, which you can read about in that article here. But the thinking behind this is to make the user less responsible for all of this and only make them responsible for the changes. And I think there's also an option to just have the whole thing if you prefer that. So in my case, or at least in my experience with Tailwind 1, all of the changes are within the theme. So I was getting the font stack here. So I'm just going to grab this whole font family and just change it. As you can see, Roboto is already here. I'm just going to move it to the top in my config, in my personal config. So let me just grab all of this. This is the font family. Let's go back to my Tailwind config and just paste that in and change it. Okay, and it's going to move this up. And now hopefully that works. Just check out my site. Is this Roboto now? Okay, it is. And it is pulling from Google Fonts. Awesome. Okay, so now for the colors of my site. There actually isn't too much going on. There is a blue, which is taken from the logo, which I use all over the site. I use it here. I use it for the buttons as well. So that's basically the only custom color I have. I think I have a blue dark as well for the hover state as this, for this, but that's it. So it makes sense to just define my own color scheme. So that's what we'll do here. You can actually extend it as well if you still want to use Tailwind's defaults. And I'll show you how to do that with another property. But you can do that for colors if you want. Okay, so I'm just going to copy my config I have here, just save time. And I'm just going to paste it in. So I still need the grays because there's different variations of gray here. But like I said, I'm just going to grab the blue, a blue dark, and the grays. So I'm going to put it on top of font family. Paste that in. So as you can see, I still have transparent. I have a black, a white. Here's the blue dark, and here's all the grays. Okay, save that, and there should be no changes here. But now we can finally continue. So back to our code, default. So on the header is where I want to put this border top, this over here. This is actually quite large, but in terms of the width, Tailwind doesn't have the width I want, but I will add that in a second. So I'm going to make it just 2 pixels for now, just to see if it actually renders. And within here, I'll have a nav. And I want a container here. And I want X auto. We want flexbox, justify between items center, and we want some padding. 8. And here is where we want the logo. This is the first flex item. It's going to go to the home page. And you can put an SVG in here, but I'm going to use an SVG still, but I'm going to use an actual logo, which is not in here yet. I'll put it here in a second. I'm going to put it in the static folder. Logo.svg, logo. So my rule for SVGs is, and I don't know if this is the right way, this is the way I do it. use SVG as much as possible, but if it's like a sort of image, this will be a lot of inline SVG, and I don't want that cluttering up my codes. That's what I did for the logo. I think the logo shouldn't be too bad, but I just added it as an image. So this, and this, I would add as an image. It's still an SVG, and everything else, like icons, like this. What else? These dots, and these icons down here, I'll just use inline SVG. Again, that's just my personal preference. I don't know if there's any benefits to not do it that way or whatever. Okay. Okay, next is the actual navigation, which I only have 2. So let's make it uppercase. Tracking wide, font, bold, flex, items, center. So let's add some list items in here. Let's put a margin right on it. And this one is going to go to, I'm not going to put the links in here. So the class is text gray 800. And hover, I want it to be a slightly lighter gray, gray 600. Okay. And this one's going to be called courses. And let me just duplicate this. And this one will be called YouTube. All right, let's see what we get. So the logo is not in there yet. Let me just change this. Say logo. Okay, so you can't really see because my resolution is really low right now. But I don't think the container is working. I think we have to add something in our config. Actually, let's see if it's working. So container. So yeah, it's not working. There's no container class here. Actually, no, it is working. We just will have to add a padding on that, and we can do that in our config. So Tailwind config. Again, in theme, we can add container and set a padding on it. Set it to 1 rem. Okay. Okay, so there's some padding on it now. Cool. Okay, so for this border top, I only used 2 pixels here, and I want to use a bigger one. So look for border widths here, right here. We can just copy this, paste it in there in our own config, and just add whatever width we want here. Or let me show you how to extend this. So we can still make use of this, but only add 1 to our Tailwind config. And you can do this for colors as well, or anything else in here, not just colors, if you want to still keep the defaults, but add on to it. So you would definitely make use of this a lot if you like Tailwind's defaults. So what you would do is add a new extend key, and you would just specify the property in the default config. In our case, it was border width, and just add whatever property or whatever value you want. So in our case, we want this 14. That's how large I want the border width to be, and now I can use that. Cool. So now in my default border top, we can do 14, and this will be as thick as I want it. Cool. Okay, so let's add the footer now. So if you take a look at that design, it's just this section over here. So let's go ahead and add that. So back to our default view, here's where the slot gets passed in. So let's put it right underneath. So we'll add a new footer tag and say BG blue, text white. And within here is the container, MX auto, flex, items center, justify between, and some padding. And then the first flex item is going to be copyright 2019. I should probably do this in JavaScript so it automatically updates each year, but we'll just hard code it for now. And then the other section is going to be flex as well. Items center. Actually, let's make it a unordered list. This should have updated. I don't know why it didn't. Oh, it's because that's messed up. Let me just do it manually. Okay. So let's add a list item, margin right of 8. And in here, this is where our icons go. So let's just say, just put a placeholder in here, and let's just duplicate this. I think I have 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just see if it looks okay. Okay, it does. Now let's fix this issue. It's actually not an issue because I'm going to have a lot of content in here and it's going to be longer than the height of the screen. But if I ever make other pages that don't span the height of the screen, I want the footer to be on the bottom. So let's fix that. So I believe all I have to do is change the entire div, which is this one here, to flex column, and give it a min height screen. Does that fix it? Not yet. Okay, we still have to see. I get this issue a lot. I don't know why, where it doesn't reload correctly, so I have to restart the server. Okay, I think I just have to set this content in here, the flex grow, and that will make sure that this is always the minimum height of the screen. So where the slot is, we can wrap this in a div, flex grow, and hopefully that works. And it does. There we go. Why is there no padding on this? Oh, I forgot the 8. Okay. So I'm just going to paste in the code for the SVGs as well as the logo here, just so we can save some time. Okay, so I added the logo asset, I added the icons, and I also fixed a margin right here, which I removed so it's lined up to the right side here. And now we can continue. So we can finally start the content of this. I'd like to start with this section, and then we'll work our way through. So let's go into our code. Let's go into index view right here. And you can see they're using this gimage component for their images, which lazily loads images. And you can see that in effect here. So if I refresh the page, you'll see it come in gradually. Well, there you go. Well, it's frozen again, but if it wasn't frozen, then you'd see it start like this and then actually load the image in. But in order for that to work, you have to put your images locally on your own server. But what I'm going to do is just use the normal image and put it on a CDN. I'm not sure what the better approach is, but I'm just going to put it on a CDN. And by CDN, I mean Cloudinary. You know what? Probably for this video, I'll use gimage, but in the final website, I am going to put it using Cloudinary. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm going to remove this. You know what? I take that back. I'm just going to use images, but feel free to use gimage if you want. Can't make up my mind here. Okay, so I'm going to name it hero for no reason, just so it's easy to scroll through my HTML. I'm going to make a container inner, which is, as it's named, the inner container here. I'll add that in a second to my CSS. MX Auto, flex, justify between, let's give some padding. And then the first flex item is going to be the heading, and the second one is going to be the image, which I already have in here. So again, you can use Gimage if you want, but I'm going to eventually move this to Cloudinary, so I'm just going to use the image tag. Static, it's called hero. Let's just name it hero. And I have some classes on this as well. I think this is just for responsive, so we'll do that later. Let me just see if it loads. It does, cool. Actually, this goes in here. Just move that up. Okay, cool. Now let me define those container inner styles. I guess you can use utilities as well, but I just made its own CSS class for it because there's also responsive styles. So I'm going to go into here and just paste it in. It's basically just adding a max width of 800, but again, there's these media queries, so it works responsively. Okay, let's go ahead and add the heading in. Back to index right here. Okay, so actually separate it out into two divs. So full stack web developer, and I'm going to escape that, YouTuber. And this one is text blue. Welcome to my website. And here is where the styles for the large bold text goes. So text for Excel, font bold, and width 3/5. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Okay, moving on. Let's move to the next section, which is just this copy over here. And I can add that within this hero section as well, but I'm going to separate it out into different sections. So I usually end it like this. And I start the next one. So again, it's container inner, MX Auto, and it's just a bunch of text. And I'm just going to paste that in to save some time. There's a class of text XL on it, but other than that, it's just copy with links. See if that works. Awesome. And what's next? Next is these images here, which, like I said, I added them as image tags, but they are still SVGs. So let's do that. So I put this within the same section, but you can separate out if you like. Justify between items center. I really should have a snippet for this because I use this all the time. PY16. Okay, so we're gonna have two divs, and we're both gonna have a width of 1/2. And this one is gonna have the image of the browser. And I have one called browser SVG, called browser. And then we can duplicate this. And the other one is called mobile, I think. Mobile. Let's see if this works. Okay, I need to right align this one. So I believe if I just do justify end, maybe make it flex as well. There we go, cool. Okay, what's next? So this border I added to this section over here on the top and the bottom, this one over here. So I don't know why I did that. I guess I just felt like doing it that way. So let's start working on this. Okay, so let's change this while we're here. The title, just say home. And that's going to append the title of the main site. So it'll be home and then the title of the entire site. Okay, let's work on that project section. So it's after this. Okay, so let's make a new section called projects. Let me move it up for you guys. And let's container air, MX auto, text XL. Here's the border. And I make it border gray 500. There's border on the bottom as well. PY16, MB16. And that's it. Let's see if this works. Okay, so there's the borders, cool. Let's add the H2 here, or I made an H2, so let's add that. It's just going to be h2.font, bold, and some margin. Here are some projects I've worked on. And I'm going to make an unordered list here. Say class equals. So for this, you can use Flexbox if you want, and then just do items center, and you'll have 2 items here. That's totally fine. I've done that before. But I'm going to make use of CSS here for this case. So I'm going to make a class of checkmark. And MB6 for some margin. And say project 1. And let's put some lorem text in here, say 8. Okay. Let's duplicate this a few times. See how it looks. Okay, cool. And now in our CSS, we can just define that checkmark class, which I will put up here. I just put it underneath here. So it's just encoded, and I added the background repeat, no repeat, and I put a padding left, and that should do it. There we go, cool. Okay, what's next? Next is this section over here, so get to know me. So let's go ahead and do that. Back to index. So this ends projects and projects dot get to know me, and that's the same. So container inner MX auto text XL border gray 500, and this is just on the bottom. BB16 MB16, okay. And we can add an H2, font bold, MB6, get to know me, and see if that works. Cool. And this section is just basic Flexbox, so let's do that. Back to our code. .flex justify between, let me move this up, item center MB16, and this is where the image goes. I'm just gonna copy that because I'm actually using Cloudinary here, and the URL is in there already. And then let me copy section 2, save a few seconds. It's just the copy. and see how that looks. Okay, looking pretty good. So yeah, this section, I just want to embed a YouTube video about myself instead of actually writing about myself, which I plan to do in the near future. And to get a responsive embedded YouTube video is actually a bit tricky. So I followed the instructions here in this blog article. And this is what I came up with. So I'm just going to copy it again just to save some time. And yeah, you can read through this. Close this. And let's add that in. So it's not too much code. We just have to add these two classes in our CSS. I tried to make it using utilities, but for some reason it didn't work using utilities. And this is just the standard embed for a YouTube video. So the two important things are these classes, responsive container and responsive iframe. And I'm just gonna, again, I'm gonna copy some styles, which I got from that article, and just paste them in. So let me save this. Let's go into our CSS. I'm gonna put it in here. It's not too much, it's just a few things. This is the most important hack here, the padding top 56.25. And you just have to add these, save that. And now we should have a responsive Okay, so that is not working. What did I do wrong here? So yeah, that should be outside of this. So let's put it outside. See if this works. Okay, so there we go. Now that should be responsive. And it is cool. Okay, what is next? Next is this contact me section. And I'm just going to paste the contact me section in because it's very minimal. And I'm going to save some time here. Let me just close this and get to know me. And I'm just going to paste the contact me section. Again, very minimal. It's just that. And some padding, some margins. And it looks pretty good, cool. And next is the newsletter section, which we'll do. Okay, so let's make a new newsletter section here. BG Gray. So note the spelling of gray. It's G-R-A-Y in Tailwind 1.0 and G-R-E-Y in the older version, which is another big change in my opinion. So I'll do a container inner, MX auto, PY16, PB8, text center, and text XL. Make an H2, text 2XL, font bold, margin bottom 8, join my newsletter, and see how this looks. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to add the paragraph tag here, MB8, text XL. I keep adding text XL everywhere. Maybe I should move that to a parent container. And I'm not going to type it out. It's going to do norm text here. Say 24. I don't know how long it is. Okay, that's probably too long. Okay. And now let's add the form. Let's do this quickly. Obviously, I still have to hook it up to my newsletter provider, which is more work, but I'll just style it here. Form. And let's add, not sure why I have a div here. Let's flex. I'm sure I have a reason, but I'll just stick to what I did before because I know it works. Email. Name equals email. We can add a placeholder. Your email address. And here is where all the magic happens. Flex 1, BG white, rounded, rounded, R none. So this is because if you look at the design, these two corners should actually not be rounded. It's just I don't know how to make it not rounded in Sketch. But the same for the text box. These should be rounded. You probably can't see that, but these two should not be rounded. So that's what this does. Rounded R none. So padding and letting normal. Okay, there's a border. Border radius of 0. Shadow outline. This is for the focus outline. Focus border blue. We have to give it a Z index, and it's required. So save that. See if the text box renders decently, and it does. And there is not a border on it or the proper focus outline. Oh, did I do? Sorry, this should be shadow space outline on. That should do it. Okay, there we go. You can see there's no border on this side, but that's fine because the button's going to go there. So let's add the button. So button. And my VS Code is being really slow and crapping out on me, so I gotta type it in manually. Flex 2 with 40. I don't think 40 is a thing. We'll see. I might have to find that in our config. Text white. Again, I did this before, in case you didn't notice. In reality, it's just a lot of going back and forth between the browser and your code. PY3, PX8. Okay, you know what? This is too much to type out. I am gonna be lazy and paste it in. So there we go. Let's indent that correctly, see if this works. Okay, it looks pretty good. And there is actually an hover on it as well. And this is using our alternate blue. Cool. So if you look at the design, the width of this is actually not the full width of the container inner. So if you look here, it's slightly less. So let's fix that. So we just have to wrap everything in here, including the form, in another div. Sorry, again, my VS Code is crapping out on me, so I have to do it manually. Even my tab doesn't work. Okay, so div class equals width 4/5, and that should reduce the length of it. Also want MX Auto, and let's give it a margin. Okay, and that should close after the form. Save that. Okay, so that's better. Cool. Okay, now let's add these dots here. So these ones, actually, let's start with these ones since we're already here. So right after our newsletter, right after here, let's add another section here for the dots. And we'll just set the margin to a negative margin so it moves up. X auto, just add that for now. And let's give it a padded bottom. Okay, so now we can actually just paste the SVG in here. So I actually made this SVG from scratch. Not scratch, I copied the one on Gridsome like I said earlier, but then that was a slight green to match their branding, and I wanted mine to be a slight blue. So I changed it. It took me really long because I don't really know how to work with SVGs properly. I just kind of click around and hope for the best. But it worked out, and let's see if this actually renders. It's quite long. As you can see, we get this message because the performance will take a hit if it colorizes it. But yeah, so there it is. And I'm not sure why it's not centered, because there's no dash here, that's why. Okay, so now it's centered. And we can just move this up by giving it a negative margin on the top. So we can do this. Negative MT 32. See if that works. Okay. And I also have another class on it. It's just because you can see this horizontal scroll bar. We don't want that on responsive sizes. So we can just add the overflow X hidden class, which does as it sounds. And now that there should be no horizontal. Cool. Okay. Now let's add these ones up here. So these ones I stole from Refactoring UI. Where is it? Right here. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so since I'm using it twice, it makes sense to define it once and then reference it wherever we need it. You can do it inline twice if you want. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but let me show you how to just define it once and then use that. So in my default template, since everything extends this, we can just add a new section in here, which I'll add. I'm going to paste it in. So it's a div with display none, but within that div, I have this SVG. I have an ID of dots triangle on it, and this is the actual SVG. So I'm going to save that. And now if I go back into the code, where does it go? Where's the first time I use it? I use it in projects I've worked on. So let's go to there, projects, oops, projects. Okay, so I'm going to put it right underneath the H2. Let's just see if it renders first. So get a div. Again, VS Code is crapping out on me. I really need a new computer. Okay. And we can specify SVG width equals whatever you need it to be. In my case, it's 170. Height equals 170. And you can use this use syntax to reference the SVG. So in our case, we named it dots triangle. And we can close this like this. And we can save it. And let's see if this renders. Okay, so it does render. Cool. But obviously we don't want this here, so let's absolutely position it and put it in the right place. So as you can see, it's rotated here, so we'll use a transformation to rotate it. So let's do that. So first we have to make something relative. So I'm going to make this parent div relative, and then we can make this absolute. And In the old version of Tailwind, it was pin R for right 0, but in the new version, it's just right 0. And like I said, I also want to rotate it. Actually, let's see how this looks first. See if this works. Okay, so that's a start. So let's just rotate it. Let's do transform, rotate 180 degrees. See if this works. Okay, so that didn't work. I forgot the colon. Okay, so there you go. It's rotated. And I also wanted to move out here a bit more. So I'm going to do that within the transform as well. And again, I stole this straight from the Refactoring UI book website. Adam does this as well. So credits to him for figuring out how to do this in a nice way. And I'm also going to add a top 50 pixels just to move it down a bit. Or actually, I'm moving it up, but let me just show you what I mean. There you go. It was down here before, and it's relative to this, so I just moved it down 50 pixels. And that is a good position. Cool. Now, for a responsive, this kind of gets in the way. It makes this horizontal scroll bars, which we don't want. So what we have to do is wrap this whole thing in another div and just give it, again, sorry, my VS Code doesn't work, tab doesn't work. Let me just add it manually. Class equals overflow x hidden. And let me just close that out. Let's indent this, and that should fix it. Now, there you go. No more horizontal scroll bars. Awesome. So I'm not going to make you watch me do the other one. It's the same thing. It's just on this side, wherever I put it in the design. I believe it was somewhere here. Yeah, just here. So yeah, same thing, same process. Okay, so everything's looking pretty good. Let's go through everything. Pretty close to our original design. And the last thing I want to do is make it responsive. So I'm probably going to tweak it behind the scenes, but let's just see how much we can do in a few minutes. So, like I said earlier, it's pretty good because the layout is already mobile friendly. So I'm just going to pick one breakpoint and just add a few things here. So the first thing I want is to stack this after a certain breakpoint. So I'm going to use the small breakpoint, which I think is 576 or something like that. So let's go up here. And here on mobile and below, it's going to be width full, but on small and above, it's width 3/5. See if that does anything. Okay, yeah, that's not going to do anything because we have to change this too. So flex call by default, but on mobile and above, flex row. So that should stack it. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. This is the thing I was modifying. We'll do this in a second. So that looks good. Let's center it as well. So let's put it here. So by default, it's centered, but on small and above, it's left. Justified. That should do it. Okay, cool. And let's do the same for this guy. So I am going to give it a margin top of 8 by default, but on small and above, no margin top. And here, it's going to be centered by default, and nothing above mobile. Okay, cool. See if this still works normally, and it does. Cool. Okay, back to this. This is in our index. In our default. So let's go up to where our nav is. So nav, again, same thing, flex call by default, small and above, flex row. That should stack it. Cool. And let's just add, I'll wrap this in a div. You don't have to, but I like containers for my things. Again, my VS Code emit is not working, so I gotta do it manually. Let's add that. And let's add MB4 by default, but small and above, no margin. So that just should give it some margin. Cool. Next. That's fine. You can make this a smaller text too if you want, but I'm going to leave it. This is fine too. I think what I did originally was hide this because it doesn't really serve a purpose and just have one image. I'm just going to leave it. This is fine. This will stack. So again, back to index. Let's look for get to know me. So here, flex call by default, small and above, flex row. And that's fine for me. This is good. This we have to fix as well. So this is already fixed, I think, because I pasted the icons in. It took the code for the responsive, so that works nicely. So yeah, let's quickly fix this, and then we'll call it a day. So let's do the same thing and just stack it after a breakpoint. So where are we? Form. Okay, so flex. Okay, and here we can do flex call, small flex row. See if that does anything. Okay. And that's actually fine. We can add the rounded corners on this if you want. I'm probably going to do that behind the scenes, but that is enough for me. Yeah, everything's looking pretty good. So let's take a look at the responsive styles. Looks pretty decent. And let's make sure that our desktop version still works. And it does. Awesome. So there you have it, guys. We've managed to build out my new redesigned website using Gridsome and Tailwind 1.0. Now I'm going to keep my actual website repo private, but what I'll do is release a generic version of this, which is based on what we learned here. I might even add a few more features to it. Maybe a blog. Maybe I'll add a menu here, which actually scrolls to the different sections. And maybe I'll change up the images, or maybe I'll just leave them. So yeah, you guys can play around with that when I'm done. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be done by the time this video is released, but just check the video description and it will be there when it's done. Also, by the time you're watching this, hopefully this website should be up and running on my domain. I still gotta tweak some things. Obviously, I gotta connect this to my email provider, and I gotta tweak some other things as well. I gotta get hosting in place and all of that stuff. So anyways, like I said, this was a long one, so if you stuck around to the end, thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.